Back when I was doing the Thundercats retrospective, I realized that there was a lot of common assertions about the show that simply weren't true at all. Its animation was good, the voice acting was solid, and there were no heavy-handed moral summaries at the end. So I wondered, how did that assumption come about? Well, for better or worse, Filmation's He-Man and the Masters of the Universe was the go-to symbol of animation for the 1980s, which many, save for the fans of the series, claim is little more than a poorly animated toy commercial. This is only partially true. Yes, the series did begin as toy designer Mark Taylor's pitch to the executives at Mattel. However, the actual story that gave the toy line context was not what was seen in the 82 series. The initial story of He-Man was made in the mini-comics. He-Man was a barbarian from the Eternian tribe on a planet that went through a great war that ended several civilizations, which left advanced technology scattered, with only a few people knowing how to operate it. This tech would only be used by He-Man to defend Castle Grayskull from a certain skeleton-faced man. The story would then receive some reworking in the cartoon. As for the development of the cartoon, funnily enough, it actually did begin with Mattel coming to Filmation for developing a commercial for their toy line. One of Filmation's founders, Lou Scheimer, was also developing a Conan-styled show called Black Star. So when he was working on the commercial, he thought about making it into its own show. Couple that with a demand for proper context for the toys, and an icon of the 80s was born. While many would say that the show was representative of 80s animation as a whole, I don't see that way. It's more of a transitional show between 70s and 80s animation. It still uses limited animation techniques that were present in the 70s, but it takes influence from sword and sorcery fantasy like Conan and Frank Frazetta's illustrations. The really strange thing about the show's animation is that some of it's rotoscoped, which means they drew over film footage for the animation. The problem is that a lot of their rotoscoped footage is, well, bland. The reused sideways walk cycle for just about every character is a good example of this. There is little personality to the character beyond walking. It's not like it would have taken much longer than what they had already put in. All you really need is different reference footage and some good direction. After all, if you're going to be drawing a walk cycle that's going to get reused a lot, give it some personality. Kinda like how Scooby-Doo did years prior. The other issue with their reused animation is that sometimes they'll use one asset that doesn't quite fit the composition or perspective, making the shot look really weird. Do these issues ruin the show? Not really, but that little bit of appeal in your animation can go a long way and highlight the personality of your characters. Since this is also a design dungeon video, let's cover the major characters of the show, starting with, who else, Prince Adam and his alter ego He-Man. Prince Adam, being of royal lineage, is dressed in a red tunic with a white undershirt and pink pants? Well, it does tie into him trying to contrast himself with He-Man, who wears little more than a red loincloth and a steel harness over his chest, emblazoned with a cross-shaped emblem. What the two do share is their chin-length bowl cut, and both being absolutely ripped. The absurd similarities between the two makes it clear that the alter ego idea was more of an afterthought in terms of design. They are so similar, though I will concede that when it comes to personality, the two identities are mostly different. Adam comes off as being something of a goofball and a slacker, preferring to pass his time fishing or cooking rather than doing anything particularly princely. Of course, this is his cover for being He-Man, who is far more active, brave, and his voice is noticeably deeper than Adam. They also added a little reverb to his voice for some extra mystical flair. What is very much shared by them is their humor. Both Adam and his guys of He-Man love making puns and one-liners, though He-Man oft does it at his enemy's expense. Really, my big complaint with them is the lack of strong visual difference between the two egos. He-Man himself, however, is a very striking design, and it's little wonder why he's so iconic.
Brutal.
There's not much to Cringer, so I'll be quick. He's basically a big cat version of Scooby-Doo, and when he's Battle Cat, he barely talks. Somehow, he manages to pull off green with orange stripes. Somehow.
Crazy.
Man-at-Arms, otherwise known as Duncan, is the character who really brings the science fantasy aspect of the show into the cast. His armor is a modified version of what the Royal Guard wear, befitting his position as Prince Adam's mentor. His palette is green and sort of a yellowish orange, fairly complimentary like Cringer, and it looks fine in the show. Character-wise, he's got a lot of relationships going for him. Again, he's Adam's mentor, and he's part of the inner circle that knows that Prince Adam is He-Man. He's also Teela's foster father, who knows her backstory, which we'll get to. He's the advisor to King Randor, and he's also an inventor with a load of gadgets. He's also partially responsible for the good chunk of the tech in the series. At least I suspect so. Solid design, solid character.
Brutal.
Teela is an interesting character with an okay design. Sure, her outfit looks fine with the white and bronze palette, but it doesn't sell her martial powers that much. It does, however, give off a bit of a mystic look to her instead, especially with her tiara and high collar, the latter of which does make sense considering she's actually the sorceress's daughter. However, the sorceress couldn't raise her because, outside of Grayskull, she's locked into Eagle mode. Eventually, Teela will be able to take on her mother's mantle, but until then, she's a fairly competent member of the team who can hold her own without magic or even all that much tech.
Brutal.
Unfortunately, now that I've spilled the beans about Teela, there's not much left to really say about the sorceress. I mean, she's got that eagle motif going with her outfit, because she turns into an eagle outside of Grayskull. But as far as characterization goes, 90% of the time, she's just there to exposit about the episode's conflict and provide magical assistance when possible.
Crazy.
After what I saw with Thundercats and what they were doing with Snarf back in the 85 show, I was willing to give Orko the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he's actually a good character with an annoying voice that got on people's nerves. Nope, he's actually the worst goddamn character of the show. He is the worst take on the inept mage ever. He bungles his spells when the writers think that it's going to be a funny moment, but all it does is make him super annoying. I'm convinced that you could remove Orko from the show and immediately improve it. There's no need for him. The villains are the comic relief, especially when He-Man's around anyways. Why need Orko? Really, I want somebody in the comments to make an argument in Orko's defense. Why? Why should Orko even exist here?
Dead weight.
King Randor of the House of Miro is the planetary ruler of Eternia, and he looks the part. Aside from that, he's just the typical fair and just king sort of archetype. Honestly, I wish there was more to really say about him.
Crazy.
Now, Queen Marlena Glenn is the epitome of hidden freaking depths. First of all, she's actually an astronaut from the planet Earth. Seriously, I'm not making this up. She is actually from Earth. This may make her one of the most interesting characters in the series. In fact, I think she's probably one of the other contributors to Eternia's technological progress. Also, she may actually know that Prince Adam is He-Man. It's clear that she's pretty freaking sharp. Seriously, she's super interesting as a character, and I kinda wish she got more focus in general.
Awesome.
Before I get to Skeletor, I'll go over some of the forces of evil in a short lightning round. Beastman, why are you so orange? Blast Attack, dumb name, even dumber power. Clawful, giant enemy crab. Evelyn, oh look, another evil mage who's prone to treachery. Add her to the pile. Fangman, left back in the past. Icer, showed up for one episode and was never seen again. Jitsu, there's a Ghost of Tsushima joke to be made, but I didn't actually play it. Merman, apparently Mermista decapitated him with his own trident. Panther, more threatening than Skeletor. Trapjaw, sure, he's actually a decent threat, but I can't take him seriously with that headgear. Triclops, yes, spinning his eyepiece does make him dizzy. Awful technical oversight if you ask me. Collectively, they get a C. I tried doing quite a few of them, and they all wound up getting a C. Skeletor. All of your minions pale in comparison. His color palette is a glorious combination of royal purples and mystic blues, all contrasted against a bright yellow skull under a menacing hood. Above all else, Skeletor steals the show. He revels in being evil. All of his lines are solid gold and delivered with the most nasally high-pitched voice that Alan Oppenheimer could muster. I love him, and so did the writers, because every so often they make a bigger evil so he can team up with He-Man and actually win for once. In the end, he's probably the reason why I came back to watch the show over and over again.
Awesome!
In the end, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe is a very important piece of animation from the 1980s, marking not only the transition from the animation techniques and style of the 70s, but also marking the rise of toy-like cartoons. While the show is rather campy and the animation can be janky, there is a charm to it. The dialogue is rather witty, especially with He-Man and Skeletor. What's more is that it laid the foundations of a setting that would get refined over the years, which we'll be going over in the examination of He-Man's animated outings. So stay tuned for the next part in the He-Man Retrospective!